We could always do what everybody else does. We could watch it on TV.
Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. So, during my most recent never-ending rewatch of Doctor Who, I noticed something about both of RTD's eras that's both distinctive and something that I really enjoy and feels quintessential to the world of Doctor Who, or at least the world of New Who, and specifically Doctor Who when Russell is the showrunner. And that's its propensity to utilize the conventions of mass media in order to both facilitate exposition and allow for a more relatable ripple to be seen in this science fiction world. But something that I appreciate very specifically about how Russell does this is the fact that Doctor Who has always been a BBC production, and being at the BBC means Russell can make all this world building feel more legitimate. Whether it's access to the content libraries of the BBC, their trademarks, their logos, and the incredible amount of cameos of notable people. And because these are sort of under the giant BBC umbrella, I would assume he's able to do this without having to drain the budget for copyright. I'm pretty sure out of most, if not all the things I talk about here, Big Brother might be the only thing that they mention continuously by name that's not owned by the BBC. And of course, the first RTD era of Doctor Who took place from, 2005 to 2011? And so I think it's really interesting both his obsession with mass communication and his knack for imbuing it into the world, that he does this at basically the last time in history where the family is sitting down to watch the same shows, that there's sort of one major set of trends at a time, that news is still mainly coming from television and from papers. This sort of cultural world of media was at its last era of being truly centralized. And I think the variety of times where in the Doctor Who universe, when we see these, news clips or shows or whatever, we're generally with a set of characters that is sitting around a television all together, both in Aliens of London and Idiot's Lantern, and Sound of Drums as well. I guarantee there's more, but, throughout these montages, we're able to see a variety of families, of people, of all ages, from different communities, coming together to gather around the television and learn about the news of the day. And that's something that I think, as we'll talk about, the sort of very on-the-nose social commentary of the giggle probably didn't succeed as well as a lot of this stuff in the past, because Russell is really comfortable at writing in a sci-fi world that still follows the conventions that we as a Western society had around television from about the 50s to the 2010s. And because mass communication itself is so decentralized now, with social media, with streamers, a lot of television in general, but specifically Doctor Who has had a hard time encapsulating the social digital world in the same way that they were able to with television. To sort of break down the ways that they're used narratively, in most episodes that include news footage and things like that, we'll generally see those scenes at the beginning or at the end, the beginning to show exposition, and at the end to sort of close off showing how whatever the alien incursion was affected the general population at the time. And the other thing that I really enjoy in Doctor Who's use of these elements of television are the ways that then they can subvert them. Especially in an episode like Bad Wolf with the insane futuristic murderous game shows. Things that are normal in our culture's media are made to feel scary or alien, literally or figuratively, because of their juxtaposition. And so, of course, most of the time that we're getting episodes like this, it's going to be episodes that are taking place in the current time. I think the only one that we really see television affecting the past is obviously in Idiot's Lantern. We get Bad Wolf in the future, but the major reason that these news sequences exist is for, audience relatability, I would say. And so it makes sense that most of the times we get these montages, it's when whatever the monster of the week or whatever is affecting people, in the current time that the show is being shot at. Especially for seasons 1 and 2, that happens pretty much any time they're in the current time period. But Russell only pulls out the stops and does like the real montages when it's most impactful, and that's mostly in episodes related to the overarching narrative. And that's generally also when you'll see the news go consistently through the episode. And the cool thing about the big montages is that it goes through all these different aspects of culture, you know, whether it's cameos from all these different people. We see stuff from high and low culture, serious and funny, news, fashion, game shows, talk shows, musicians. And the more multifaceted it is, the more you get a big span of understanding, because obviously seeing the news segments is helpful, but it's only one thing in a giant world of media and culture. And you know, I mentioned logos before, and I don't know who facilitated this or why, but it's interesting to see the times when they use the BBC logo in the news segments and when they don't. And of course, I know BBC News was called BBC News 24 up until 2008. In a lot of season 3 and season 4, they don't have the BBC logo. It just says News 24. Technically, to a keen viewer, yes, that is the quote-unquote accurate logo, but I'd be very curious to know why they take it off in some places and why they don't. And whenever it just sort of says News 24, I always feel like there's a little something missing there. And you get that in general with the American news, you know, not being real, or like the speech that somebody in the government is making in The Giggle. It's like a very basic crest on the front of a desk. And so, you know, especially in a show where they do have access to logos, trademark, these real world things, you can really tell when they don't. And so it's interesting then that in season 4, we get a lot more with Trinity Wells, which of course I loved the Alex Jones cameo that they gave her in The Giggle. I thought that was one of the funniest bits out of any of these things I'm talking about. But I wonder if the BBC was like mad they were using the logo so much and gave it to her instead. And so when I talk about the cameos and varieties of cameos, I thought it would be best to just sort of read out everybody just so you can see the variety of people and the quantity of them throughout. In Bad Wolf, we of course have Anne from The Weakest Link, Trini and Susanna from What Not to Wear, Davina McCall's first appearance as the voice in the Big Brother house. In Army of Ghosts, they have the medium Derek Acora, Alistair Appleton doing Ghost Watch, this sort of British Maury, Wendy Williams, whatever, Trisha Goddard. In Aliens of London, you have Matt Baker from Blue Peter making the spaceship cake. And while I would assume there are probably more I'm missing, there's at least one actual BBC reporter, Andrew Marr, doing the news. In Stolen Earth, you get Richard Dawkins, and then Paul O'Grady on the new Paul O'Grady show. In The Sound of Drums, Harold Saxon gets testimonials from the 2010s boy band McFly, the Osbournes, and the actual Minister of Employment, Ann Whitcomb. Of course, in Church on Ruby Road, you get Davina McCall again. And in The Giggle, there was all that stuff with Stooky Bill and John Logie Baird, which is, of course, the real history of television. And I'll talk a little bit more about it as we go on, but Power of Three, and in that, the scientist Brian Cox and Lord Sugar from Apprentice make cameos as well. And so obviously I'm talking about all the RTD eras of the show, but looking through all of this, it's really interesting to see how different it is from the way that Moffat tackles the show generally. And it's very clear with this pattern that he isn't interested in doing this sort of thing. At least in Smith's era, I'm not sure about Peter Capaldi. There's only one episode with this, The Power of Three. Rarely are 11, Amy, and Rory in contemporary times, and whenever they are, it's generally a very personal story going on. You know, we never really get the sort of cultural grandeur and being able to see what happens at a very large communal scale like we do with Russell. That's especially true when you look at the finales of each season are generally much more about some big bad happening to time itself or to Amy or Rory or the Doctor. You know, it's not about these societal ripples that Russell loves. And so all of this cultural stuff makes it more relatable, and it makes it more contemporary, which also then, looking back, 15, almost 20 years now, makes it a really interesting time capsule for what the televised world was like in Britain in the early 2000s. And it allows for this incredibly visual ripple effect. Because, of course, we get the general audience surrogate of the companion to sort of react how we, as a quote-unquote normal person would or whatever. But I actually think sometimes it can mean more to the average person to see how these things affect the common man, the people as a whole, especially because we as a society have been witnessing atrocities through mass media for generations. And for me, it just really connects to see that same thing going on here. It's also fun. It's fun to see what it's like when you can't look behind the curtain with the Doctor, to sort of imagine what it's like in this world when you don't have this behind the scenes access. It's a fun way to sort of put the pieces together about what the public knows, what they don't know, and how they're being made to feel about it. And that itself can also bring up things about the general social commentary that Russell's era had, whether it's about propaganda, fear-mongering, misinformation from the press. And because we as an audience get that, behind-the-scenes view from the Doctor and his companions, it's really funny in a way to see how stupid and gullible we as a population are. Really interesting to see how quickly the population catches on to misinformation and makes it spread through different facets of culture and life. Different aliens fooling us over and over, the Slitheen, the Cybermen, the Master, the Cubes, the Toymaker. And even though Russell actually has a number of plot lines where mass communication does global good, especially all the stuff with the, Archangel Network and saying Doctor, and I think in general, all of this sort of stuff really shows how mass media can bring out the worst in us. And if not bring out the worst in us, lay it bare. Even when what he's doing isn't BBC specific, Russell in general is just obsessed with how media integrates itself within a culture. He's so obsessed with understanding mass communication in the age that was transitioning between majority analog to majority digital. So there are still things about phones, there are things about social media, people are on laptops all the time and whatever, but we have had so many insane technological innovations in the last couple of decades, and it really is crazy to see how drastically different very normal things like where you get your news, how you watch your favorite show, whatever. We're looking at a whole set of elements that kind of don't exist in popular culture anymore. And that's probably one of the reasons why I find this so interesting, is because he really was able to get that in a way that also I think so much science fiction, television, films, anything, not even sci-fi, have such a hard time conceptualizing and visualizing concepts related to the digital age. Think about how many jokes people make about, bad Netflix shows where somebody's gonna text the whole school, "You're nudes," or everything's on Flipbook and blah blah blah. And so I think in this sort of fatigue of fake apps and fake texting lingo and people from generations who don't really understand how that stuff works, trying to make it work and failing, it's really interesting to see a period of time where you were able to try to create those ripple effects and succeed. Overall, Russell is really interested in the universality of media, how it brings us together, how it will bring us against each other. I think his era will be a fascinating relic to see how our world worked and, again, how it would have worked if things like what happened in Doctor Who would happen here. So I recorded this while we were in the midst of season 1, and now that it's over, we actually have a couple more references and Easter eggs and appearances. The only actual BBC news we get is watching Roger Ap William run away in 73 yards. We have BBC News anchor Amal Rajan, both in 73 yards, and we see that footage again in Empire of Death. The Doctor mentioned Strictly Come Dancing and Rogue, and of course all of that is quite a Bridgerton ripoff. And in Legend of Ruby Sunday, we get a mention of the CBeebies story time, mention of Davina again, and we see a speaker that has BBC Radio 1 playing. But now that the season is over, I think I can confidently say that the RTD2 era has fallen into the trap that I kind of was expecting it to. And I really feel like the first Russell era would have had a lot more of this stuff. But since this sort of centralized mass media has died out culturally, and because they don't really want to do bullshit social media stuff, they don't engage at all really in the media of today besides these sort of throwaway lines. And while I think that makes sense for the majority of episodes, I do certainly think there was a lot more to be done in 73 Yards, as well as everything in Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death with Susan. I think if we had more specifics and maybe saw families watching the Sutek product launch, what was already a pretty powerful ending to that two-parter would have been so much more impactful. So we'll see how it goes with the Christmas special and the seasons as time goes on, but now that we've seen this, I really think all the elements that I enjoyed in Russell's first go that I talk about here are truly now a thing of the past. Alright, so that's about it. I would be very interested to hear what people have to say about this. Are there any other shows or films or whatever that you think did this sort of thing really well? How do you see Doctor Who faring in the future as things go more and more digital? What's your favorite cameo or favorite moment from any of these montages? And I've been saying this at the end of every video, but I have two gigantic projects I've been working on for a million years that are eking their way closer. And I was kind of out of the habit of making videos like this for a while, but I'm trying to get back into it now that I'm realizing how long these large things are taking. So if you have any suggestions for any more casual videos I could do, I'd be very interested to hear. Make sure you like, subscribe, love to hear you comment. It'd be cool if you subscribed, if you put that little bell on. Thank you so much again for watching, and I'll see you next time.